You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
Hey Ramblers! Today's episode is brought to you by Fangoria. Since 1979, Fangoria has been the authority in the world of contemporary horror. As the only sanctuary for horror aficionados in its early days, it has now grown into an empire that expands beyond its celebrated magazine. From t-shirts, coffee mugs, beanies, enamel pins, there's something for every horror fanatic in your world, even if it's you. So head on over to shop.fangoria.com/pencil and paper productions or use code pencil and paper productions at checkout to get 20% off your first order or magazine subscription. Yes, it is a mouthful, which is why there are links in the show notes down below. That's shop.fangoria.com/pencil and paper productions or code pencil and paper productions at checkout for 20% off. Fangoria, first in fright since 1979.
Buy it or we'll tear your soul apart.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Horror Ramblings podcast. You guys know what this show's about. It's that horror show with those two awesome guys that talk about horror and everything else that comes to our minds. It's random, it's crazy, it's insane, it's everything you want in your psycho killers. Let's be real. As always, it's me, Les, and as always, I am joined by Mr. Steven. How are you today, Steven?
I'm doing all right. I hope everyone else is having a fairly decent day today.
It's a little rainy here.
Same.
Little crummy. You know, it's amazing. We live like 4 hours away from, well, about 4 to 6 hours, somewhere in between there. I can never remember.
About 6.
But it amazes me how similar the weather is all the time.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how it is in different areas where you live, but here you can drive a town over and it's like it's a whole other season.
Wow.
So yeah, it's one of those things that's just insanity to me. But oh man, have you caught up on Chucky? I want to ask that first. Have you caught up on Chucky?
I did. We finished, like, as soon as the season finale hit the other day, I was like, no, I got to go ahead and watch this now because I don't want to wait. I didn't feel like I would get spoiled because that doesn't really seem to be a show that, I guess unless you're actively looking for anything, it's not going to be spoiled. Like, people aren't chomping at the bit over on Twitter or anything like that, going like, oh my God, Chucky, ah. So, but I wanted to go ahead and kind of close it out, see how they ended it. And this is a very interesting season. A lot of what they did.
I think because of the things that I look at on TikTok, because I look up a lot of horror stuff on TikTok, I do get a lot of Chucky content from the show. And I've seen some of the stuff that happened in this latest episode, and I'm like, okay. I'll be completely honest. I have not started Chucky. Like, everything I know about the series, I know because of talking to you, and I know because of, like, seeing pieces of the show on TikTok and stuff. I was honestly going to wait until this season wrapped, which it sounds like it has. And then I was going to just binge all of it. Just do a sitting, get done with it. I have a whole new respect for Chucky now. Yeah. And it's not that I didn't like Chucky. I guess I was sort of in the same mindset that most people who don't really get the concept of Chucky had. I enjoyed watching Chucky, but I was like, he's just a killer doll, people. Come on. Like, but there's so much more to it than that. And seeing like the stuff from the series and everything, Chucky's just so much fun to watch. And if we ever get the chance to have Brad Dourif on the show, I would love that. Yeah. Because he seems like he's just a legitimately wholesome person. And I can't think of the boy's name. It's the boy from season 1 who Chucky like befriends.
Oh, Zachary Arthur. Yeah.
So I saw some behind the clips. What am I saying? Behind the scenes clips. There we go. Where Brad Dourif and him are actually or like talking, and I guess he was trying to like imitate Brad Dourif's voice for part of the show, and it was cool because he would do it in front of Brad Dourif, and Brad Dourif would kind of be like a smart ass, but in a nice way, and he'd be like, no, you got to do it like this, and he'd do the Chucky voice, and like they had a good time with it, but it just, you can tell that there's a lot of love for what they're doing in the show, and I know we've talked about that before. You can always seemingly tell when people love what they're doing on a show, and it seems like all these guys really love the Chucky series, and they have a big love for it. And obviously, I mean, Dourif loves the character because I know we talked about this on one of the last shows. He decided to retire from acting aside from Chucky work, and I think that's cool. I think everybody finds that one character that they love. I'm not saying that every actor is like that. I don't know if Doug Bradley would want to play Pinhead forever. I think he wants to do one more go around as Pinhead, which would be cool. Kane Hodder, I know he would love to play Jason again. Like, he's one that I think would play Jason as long as he possibly could. And in all honesty, it would be kind of cool if they did like some sort of legacy sequel with an older Jason who has to like think about his killing a little bit differently because he is older. Like, I think that would be really badass. And then, like, there's Robert Englund. I don't necessarily think Robert Englund would be wanting to play Freddy for the next 10 years. I mean, he said that he's done with it, but I think it's mainly he's done with it because he doesn't think that he fits that character anymore.
Right.
That's where Brad Dourif is a little lucky. He's just doing a voice.
Yeah.
He's doing Chucky's voice. I get that he is physically in the show, but I also love the concept that even though Chucky is ageless, until the deal is broken and everything, Chucky's been ageless all these years, but we see his human soul, and his human soul is old. And I love that concept. I think that's cool. I think it should be that souls age, and maybe it's one of those things where if you're an evil soul, you don't age. You age in a more like decrepit type manner, a more dark type of way. And then if you're a pure soul, you age in a more, beautiful essence, I guess you could say. I think that's a cool concept that they could, kind of throw in to all of that.
I even think what they did in this last episode where you got to see older Chucky in human form, they had multiple versions of Chucky there kind of in this realm. And it was actually really cool because since his daughter had been playing the younger version of him, they actually got to have some screen time together as old and young Chucky.
They kind of had an argument about older Chucky was like, I'm you that's learned to savor things a little bit more.
Yeah.
I've learned to take my time and enjoy it. And they're like, what the fuck are you talking about? And there was like a whole argument. And I love that his daughters, because I think he has 2 daughters, if I remember, he has 2 or 3 kids, but I think he has like 2 daughters. But I think all of them are involved in some degree with all of this. So it's like his whole family is setting up a new, they're building upon the foundation that he built. Because let's be real, he's iconic as Chucky. You don't see him a lot. You don't see Brad Dourif a lot, but you hear Chucky. And I want to say one thing that I thought was clever and made me really just, it gave me such a laugh. And that was when he meets, what is is it Damballa?
Yeah.
Right? When he meets Damballa, Damballa takes the form of a good guy doll. And I love that. I think that is hilarious. And I love how he's like, I thought you'd look different. I love that. Didn't he say something like, I thought you'd look like a snake or something? He said something along those lines.
Something along that. And then Damballa was just like, I just take the form of the thing that you treasure most.
Yeah, I love that. I think that is hilarious. The only thing that I want so very badly, they had those little cameos in the one episode of other killer doll movies. I still want the original Chucky to poke fun at the remake.
Yeah.
I want that so badly. And I'm going to say this, and I'll get hate for it. For what that remake was, I enjoyed it. For what it was, I thought it was decent.
There were some good concepts in there. And
yes.
I appreciated the different approach, that they weren't trying to do a one-to-one remake.
Yeah.
And they were trying to approach it from a different perspective other than just the doll is evil. And
Yeah.
I kind of appreciated that aspect of it. But at the end of the day, obviously, there's something lacking that it doesn't
have
the same.
Yeah, it doesn't have that magic of the original one. But
Yeah.
I think the fact that they didn't try to just do a full-fledged remake, and they came up with sort of an original concept as to how everything played out. I think that is what makes the movie redeemable. Like that's the thing that made me enjoy it. It was like, okay, I'm not just watching them do a flushed out version of what the original story was. This is something different, something unique. And Mark Hamill as Chucky, I kind of liked that. I thought that was cool. And one thing that I really thought was cool about the remake, which I will say this too, I loved how the good guy dolls, they had all the different versions, but I even liked that they did like a good guy teddy bear version. Like I thought that was kind of cool, because I thought about it, and a lot of companies do that with toys. They'll have, they'll release all kinds of different versions of dolls and stuff like that. Another thing I think would be funny, there is a company that makes horror themed dolls. They're called Living Dead Dolls. And they're really popular in the horror communities.
I think I've heard of
they
it,
have them of all, they have them of all kind of characters. I have a Freddy Krueger one, but they have a Chucky and a Tiffany one. Like they actually have, so they're dolls that are versions of other dolls. It would be hilarious if Chucky needed like a quick little loner body just to, until he gets to another one. And if he were to possess one of those little, and maybe Tiff could make like a joke about him being extra cute or something, and him just being like, "What the hell is this?" and just throwing things out there. I think would be funny. But yeah, I'm appreciating Chucky more and more. It's not that I never hate, I've never hated Chucky or anything like that. I've never been against those movies. I've always enjoyed them, but it's like I'm enjoying the character from a whole other standpoint now, and that makes me so happy. And yeah, Brad Dourif, if you're listening, come on our humble little show. We would love to have you on because you seem like just such an awesome human being, and it would be so cool to talk to you about Chucky and everything else. I'm sure he gets a lot of Chucky questions, but I would love to just know what he does in his free time.
Yeah, absolutely. And if here's a recommendation, not a horror recommendation, but a solid recommendation nonetheless. If you want to see Brad really owning the screen, go check out One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That was like his first big movie, if not his first movie, because I think he had an introducing credit, and he even got an Academy Award nomination for that movie, and well-deserved, because he fucking owns every scene he's in, and I love him in that movie.
And right there, I'm going to say this. People who shit on horror films and say that they're lackluster, people that kind of frown upon them and like, oh, these aren't Academy-worthy films, just look at that. A lot of these performers, they are classically trained actors. A lot of them have performances that are just phenomenal, and they don't get the credit that they deserve. I always say it. Hereditary is another one of those movies. I'm horrible with names, but the actress that played the mother in that, I'm sorry, but she should have at least got a nomination for that film because her performance in that was brilliant.
Yeah.
So, people they need to take the time to look at things a little bit more, I think. So, but man, I'm all excited about Chucky here. Do you have any horror news you want to talk about? Because I haven't seen any new movies for a while. I want to go see Abigail because it's been getting great reviews. That's a little bit of old news, though, about it getting great reviews and everything. But anything...
Well, it's been a little slow news week, but I do want to touch on one little thing with Abigail. And I hesitate to say it, but I feel like I'm just tempering expectations just a little bit. Just a little bit. Because I appreciated knowing this. I haven't seen it either, but I had a buddy of mine that went to go see it. And I asked him about one thing because when the movie came out, headlines started popping up, and I was like, I don't want to know because there is potential of possibility. And it was like, things you need to know about that special cameo at the end. And I was like, that's what I was worried about. So I asked my buddy, I said, so I heard about this cameo at the end. I said, was it something that surprised you? And he said, not really. Like, part of it did because I didn't know one thing, but it wasn't anybody that I knew. And I was like, okay, I'll just pin it right there because I know where you're going with this. Because if you have listened to this show, I'd say, I think we actually talked about it, if I'm not mistaken, back in last season when John Brennan was on, when we talked about Freaks. That's when I brought up the news about that movie and what it was supposed to be a remake of.
Yeah.
That's what the cameo is all about. And I was like, well, I kind of knew that going in, so okay. But for everybody else who's not been hip to it, then sure, it's going to be like, oh. So I get it, and I don't want to ruin that. But if you've been listening, we've referred to it as that other movie. So I don't want to do it now. But
Yeah.
chances are you've heard us say it. So it's not that big of a reveal if you've heard what we've said, but still cool nonetheless.
Yeah, it's a cool nod, and that shows that that we know our stuff a little bit.
That's right.
That's always a positive. I did want to shout out one other thing. I had seen an article about it. There's a movie. I don't know if it's come out yet or if it's getting ready to come out. I think it's out already. It's called Tarot or Tarot, however you say it. People call them tarot cards, tarot cards. It's a horror movie. The one kid from the Spider-Man movies is in it. The kid that is like Peter Parker's best friend.
Okay, yeah. Jacob Battalion, I think is his name.
Okay, yeah. He's in this, and it's basically they find these old tarot cards, and these beings on these cards will hunt them down.
Oh, okay.
Apparently, there's a lot of practical effects in it, and apparently the practical effects in it are pretty damn good from what I've heard. I just wanted to shout that out. I don't know much about the movie. Honestly, it looks like, and I hate to say this, it kind of sounds like a generic jump scare type movie, which not to belittle those films, because those films are a lot of fun for what they are. Not to expect like the best of the best out of these films.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I'd seen an article about the practical effects in it were pretty amazing. So shout out to the practical effects. I will just say that real quick because I love practical effects.
Sure, yeah.
On a random note too, I just want to say this. I binge watched Fallout.
What'd you think?
I fucking loved it. And I love the ghoul, and I love at the end when he meets Lucy's dad and he says the old movie line, which I can't think of the line off the top of my head, but I wouldn't do it justice anyways. I'm sorry, but Walton Goggins is phenomenal. He's one of those actors who needs to be in more movies. Yeah. He is just, and as the ghoul, and I've been having a running joke when I make dinner now at the house. I ask, if anybody wants to help me make dinner. And sometimes, somebody will be like, yeah, I'll be in there and help. And I'll be like, ass jerky ain't going to make itself. And everybody in the house is like, what are you talking about? I'm like, you wouldn't understand. But no, I am already impatiently waiting for the next season because I thought it was fantastic. I especially like that they threw, I feel like a lot of people get mad when they throw comedy into like serious things, and Fallout seems like it's a pretty serious show, but they do throw some comedy in there sometimes. And some people are like, you can't have that. But I'm sorry. Even in real life, when there's bad things going on, there's still funny situations that happen. And I think that makes it more real, at least to me. And one of my favorite bits in the whole series was toward the end, actually. It's where Lucy's brother goes to Vault 31, and there's the old manager that turned himself into a robot, and he's trying to stop the kid, but there's really not much he can do to stop the kid. And he's like, you won't find out. And he's like walking toward the room. He's like, oh no, you're going toward that room. Yeah, you're gonna find out everything. It's really dumb and it's cheesy, but I couldn't help but laugh about it, especially when he is trying to inject him with like the poison or whatever, and he's like, I just need you to hold still. Just hold still. Yeah. It's stupid, but it's really fantastic to me. And I love the ghoul even more because the way that they played everything out and the subtle things that he does throughout the show really, to me, make me feel like he's one of the most human characters on the show. He's the ghoul, but to me, he felt like he was the most human because he's had to become this monster that he is now.
Yeah.
And I don't mean by the way he looks, I mean just the way that he acts. You know, he became this dangerous killing machine through 200 years, you know, but it's the subtle things like him saving the dog. Like he stabbed the dog in the first place, but then he saves the dog. And then you find out that he was, you know, really close to the pet dog that he had. And he was upset, you know, about dogs weren't allowed in the vaults. And even when, like, there's a line where he looks at the dog, the new dog, and he goes, "You're not him." And to me, that actually, like, that pulled up my heartstrings a little bit. I was like, this guy's really, like, he's upset about the way that things are. Mm-hmm. And, like, I felt for him. Yeah. And that reveal at the end, the ghoul, I'm going to ruin this for people. The ghoul that, you know, Lucy finds out is her mother.
Yeah.
Like, that's just brutal. And I like the casting. I like all of the jokes. I think my other favorite joke was the guy from the Brotherhood of Steel.
Yeah.
When Lucy's talking about, she's like, "You want to have sex?" And he's like, "It'll make my penis explode." And then he eats all the oysters and the caviar, and he's like, "Do you want to make my penis explode now?" And she's like, "What?" Like, it's so stupid. But I will say, I don't think it's too random that I bring it up because there's a lot of things in that show that could take a horror turn.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, I firmly believe that. But yeah, I will recommend the Fallout series to anybody who's listening who hasn't watched it. Don't get your panties in a bunch if you like the video games though, because this takes place after all of the games. Mm-hmm. So it's its own story. It takes things from Fallout, but it's its own thing. So don't get all, "Oh, it's not like that in the game." Who cares? Just enjoy it.
No, I agree 100%. And I would share my thoughts, but I'm going to recommend you just hold your horses and wait for another show that I'm on where we talk about it in full. So that's my plug to make you go listen to that other show when that episode comes out in a few weeks. So, but I will mention one thing while you're talking about that, because I don't think I brought this up on that show. And I heard, like, when we started talking about it, it was like I heard fan uproars about and hate, and I didn't know what it was about because it was like, well, like I'm not a Fallout. I couldn't tell you shit about it. You know, I've played 4 and that's it, and I played it to completion. I played it for hours and hours and hours, and I got pretty familiar with everything in it well enough that I could be like, okay, I know some stuff, but a lot of the lore I couldn't tell you shit about. So I didn't have that going in. In fact, as you said, Walton Goggins, he was my in. Like, if he had not been in that show, I don't know if I would have approached it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Because it was just like,
I get that.
I like Fallout well enough, but it was just like, but he was my draw, so he got me in. But there was spoilers again for anybody if you haven't seen it for whatever reason. But in the show there was that settlement. What was it? Shady Sands.
Shady Sands. Yep.
Shady Sands, and got blown up. I didn't know shit about this town. Didn't know anything about it. That's one of the things people were pissed about, because apparently this was a city that was canon in one of the games, and the fact that it got blown up pissed so many people off. And I was like, but we're talking about a story, as you mentioned, 10 years prior to the last game, so it's far removed. Other shit could happen in this world, so why is this surprising? Why is this the thing that you're so mad about, that these horrible people would have done this horrible thing because they've done horrible shit throughout? It didn't make any sense to me, because it's like they don't want there to be any kind of progression in the story for anything that they love or cherish. And that's not how it works, man. So,
well, and I kind of feel like, as a fan of, you know, let's say, because I'm kind of there with you. I've not really played a lot. I know a little bit about Fallout, but I wasn't a big player of it and everything. But to me, I would be excited that this series is out and that it's doing well, because this could result in another game being made that takes place after the events of the series, possibly.
Yeah.
Or you could be thrown into this world that exists in the series now, and you could just be like a character from another vault somewhere, or, you know, anything like that. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if it's something you love, build upon it. I understand when characters die or when things get destroyed from a game that you love or something like that, that it's upsetting because let's be real, it's the same thing in TV series and things like that. If I find out in the next season of a show that I'm watching that something bad happened, then I'm going to be upset. It's perfect example, and we've talked about this on the show before. X-Men 97. They started it by lulling us in with all the nostalgia, all the wonderfulness, and it's all happy-go-lucky, and then they ripped our hearts out.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone was just destroyed. But at the same time, you're still watching. You're still trying to see what will happen next. And let's be real, it mirrors life. You have to have bad moments to appreciate those good moments. So I get people being upset that, yes, Shady Sands got destroyed, but it is progressing the story along. And let's be honest, it's a very real possibility because a lot of these things mirror reality. And if somebody doesn't like that you're doing better than them, sometimes they will destroy what you have.
Yeah.
So,
furthermore, I would even posit that had that event happened in a game, no one would be mad. I promise you that. They would be upset like, oh my God, oh man, but that's the narrative in the game, not the show.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, it's different. Gamers are a weird lot. I find it very difficult to even want to call myself a gamer because there's such a stigma behind it. Now, it's like Star Wars fans. They get mad
May the Fourth be with you.
May the Fourth be with you. The shit that they will get mad about and bend over backwards over, I don't get it. I understand being passionate about the things you love, but for fuck's sake, you gotta just give a little, just to be like, should you really be that mad about this thing? I mean, really, is it destroying your life that much that you have to be this fucking angry? I don't get it. So
Yeah.
oh
man,
you want a few little news tidbits?
I would love a few little news tidbits, and then I have something funny I would like to bring up after. It's a very brief thing, but
all right. First things first. This is a short one. I don't really have anything. Let me see if I can get an actual date. But Terrifier 3 has moved up in its release date, so it was
2 weeks, I think.
2 weeks. It was going to be on the 25th of October, and has now moved up to October 11th. So be excited if you were looking forward to that. If not, then don't worry about it. just go about your business. I don't know if we've talked about this movie at all on the show, and I guess I'm going to bring it up, the news here, and then we can talk about that. There's a remake for The Faces of Death coming, and it has surprisingly earned a hard R. Big shocker. I'm really surprised that it's only an R, to be honest. This is a film franchise I have never watched one single entry in, and I'm curious, have you?
Okay, so when Family Video was here in the town that I live in, we literally it's maybe a 5-minute walk from where I live. They had them out. They were out in like the main area, but they were like over toward like part of the back of the store. I'm surprised they weren't in the adult section, to be honest with you. But they had covers over certain like things on them, and I think a teenager maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked my dad, I was like, Dad, I've never heard of this before. He kind of looked at it and he was like, we'll give it a watch. And, they say that they're quote unquote true stories. They're really just reenactments, I guess you could say, of, but they make them look real.
Yeah.
We watched one of them. We legitimately watched one of them. And it was almost like they were talking about like different true stories of ways people have died, stuff like that. And I don't know how many Faces of Death they made because there were a few
about
of them.
5.
And I distinctly remember in the one, these people got drunk or something, and they were going to bungee jump off the side of their apartment building, and they didn't even have the right equipment or anything. And somebody jumped off the thing, and they hit a rock, and they crushed their skull open. Like that was one of the things, and they they broke their skull, they fractured their skull, and this, and I'm like thinking to myself, this is crazy. And then there was another one about a speedboat accident. Somebody fell off the boat and they went to get them and they accidentally hit them and the propeller on the boat cut their head open. Like, it was just very random, disturbing content that they made look real. Like, it was like this was the actual footage of these things happening. As weird as it sounds, it was like a more graphic version of the show 1,000 Ways to Die that used to be on TV. That's what it felt like to me. So if it got a hard R, I would assume that they are going to up the ante. What do they call those? Like a mockumentary, where it's all just like a mock thing that they do. That's what it felt like to me. And I was, like I said, I was a teenager, and my parents were pretty relaxed on horror movies. Once I like got over my fear as a kid, I mean, they didn't just let me watch everything under the sun, but as I got older, they were like, yeah, we'll give it a shot. But that's what I remember the most. I don't remember watching, I think I maybe watched one of them.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, it wasn't for me. Like, it wasn't that I didn't like it, but it was like I didn't have a desire to seek out the other ones, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. I mean, I think that's one of the reasons I've just kind of avoided it. And what happens, and this has happened numerous times over the years when it comes to horror films, is I love them, but if something is touted as something very graphic or disturbing, or just like you'd never seen anything like it before ever, I get images in my head. Like, I build it up a certain way in my head that's probably 10 times worse than what it's actually going to be.
Right.
But I have this thought in my head, like, oh man, this is good. It's going to fuck me up. It's going to show me something. I'm never going to forget it. And then it's going to be stuck in my head forever. And I just get into this kind of OCD loop where I just don't want to deal with it. And then I kind of want to, because I just want to make sure that I'm overreacting. Because I have. Yeah. I mean, anytime I've watched certain movies, when I finally watched it, I'm like, oh, okay, it wasn't that bad.
Yeah.
It was tame by comparison. I think I even had that kind of mindset when I went into Texas Chainsaw the very first time. Because, again, I didn't know. And you're thinking people killing somebody with a chainsaw, this is going to be fucking gory as shit. And it was not. It was terrifying in a lot of other ways, but not gory. So, yeah, it's just that mindset.
Yeah.
And again, if all it is just random video recreations of people dying or being killed, it's just like, well, what the fuck is that,
Well, and just to kind of piggyback real quick off of what you just said, I've noticed that when the movies do have all the hype around them, that is what we do. We put images in our mind. We think, oh, this is going to be terrible. But it's always the movies that don't really say much that really get you. Perfect example, and I hate bringing this up, but I kind of love the look that you get on your face when I bring it up. The degloving scene. Just, that is a brutal scene. And it's not something that you see coming. I think that's what makes it worse. Yeah. Another one for me is Hereditary, when she gets her head knocked off.
Yeah.
It's not even that. It's at on the next day where they show her head in the road and the bugs all over it and everything. It's just one of those scenes where you're like, holy shit, I can't believe they just showed me that.
Yeah.
You don't expect that stuff in those films because that's what they do with a lot of movies, like Faces of Death. They really hype it up as, see the unedited graphic footage of real deaths. And so you're getting all these thoughts in your mind. And like you said with Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the original Hellraiser, they even, talked about it being bloody and, everything else. And it is, but to me, it's not that disturbing because I have a mindset that it's going to be way worse than what it is. But then you get those movies that sneak up on you and you're like, oh.
Yeah, those are the worst,
what is that?
I think.
What is that movie called with the gloving? I can't think of it.
Gerald's Game.
I can't think of the name. There it is, Gerald's Game. Yeah, just, ugh.
And to such a lovely lady.
I think that's what makes it worse.
Mm-hmm. Because I'm just watching her and I'm like, don't do that to yourself, baby. I'll save you. Speaking of Mike Flanagan, since that's his movie, he is going to direct the next Exorcist film.
I had seen that.
So, what do I think about that? Look, he's a great director. I have faith that he'll do great. I still have not seen Believer. I understand people have issues with David Gordon Green, which is really bizarre because I used to, before Halloween, I felt like his name held some weight, and now it doesn't, and I don't know what's happened. So it shows how quick people can turn on you.
You know, though, and that irritates me because, and I might get some hate for this, M. Night Shyamalan. I don't mind him as a director. I think he's a pretty good director. He's done some films that aren't the best, but from a directing standpoint, I think he's a good director. If that makes sense.
That makes sense.
You know, you can have a good director, you can have a bad script.
Yeah, but he does also write a lot of his own stuff. So.
That is true. But I mean, he has some movies that I think get shit on a lot. You know,
at least one, to be fair.
I will say this: I actually didn't mind the movie The Happening, the one about the plants.
Yeah, I didn't watch it.
I thought it was an interesting concept. Like, I will say that all day. I thought it was an interesting concept, and it had some very, nature basically adapted to us, destroying it, and released pheromones into the air that made us lose our damn minds. I mean, there's a scene in it where a guy lays down in front of one of those giant driving mowers. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's brutal.
Yeah.
And yes, is it the best movie that's ever existed? No. But is it a halfway decent film? I think so. Never let him anywhere near Avatar ever again. I will say that. I didn't like The Village. Lady in the Water was okay. Mm-hmm. His early stuff is obviously his best stuff. I will say that.
Unbreakable is the best.
Yeah.
Hands down.
But as a director, I will give him credit in that, And I will also say this. He loves what he does because if you look at the films that he's funded himself to get made, and if you learn the truth about it, I mean, he took out a second mortgage on his house to fund one of his films. And when it comes to how much money he's made and how much he's spent to make movies, he's actually doing better than what people think. So I'll give him that. Okay. And I hate when directors fall into that category. The Halloween trilogy was not a bad trilogy. Stop shitting on the director because of it. That's all I'm going to say.
Yeah, I don't want to say any more about it. Like I said, I can respect him to a point, but there were some turds in there, man. Fucking Last Airbender was just...
Yeah. Awful. Oh, I know.
Anyway, last two little...
I'm not saying he's the best, but he's pretty good. But anyways.
Yeah, he's got some good ones, and he's got some shit. Last two little stories I have... And I don't even know what... Well, let's start with the less shocking one. The more intriguing one. So, Don Coscarelli, who directed all the Phantasm films, has written and released a book called Fiction, Tales from the World of Phantasm. And that's fiction with Phiction. And it's 6 stories that kind of give you some insight or extra... backstory to a bunch of characters that were in the movies. So if you're a fan of that world and want to learn a little bit more about some of our characters like Reggie and what's his name, Tim? Is it Tim? Or
I think so.
Not Tim. I'm thinking of the other boy. Fuck, I don't remember his fucking name. Then there's Rocky. She had the nunchucks, and then I think there was a character named Chunk and Ravager. That's the one I barely remember because I've only seen it once. Anyway, just fun stories that, expand the universe if you're interested. So it's available now. You can get it on Kindle. You can get it in a book, hardcover if you want, paperback. So the options are there. And then finally, because the people who did Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey have tapped into something amazing, I guess, with their... I didn't even know they gave it a name. It's called the Twisted Childhood Universe. Is what their world is.
Oh.
And they have said that they are not only we've seen Bambi the Reckoning, then they've got Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare and Pinocchio Unstrung, which will then lead up to the big Pooniverse. You hear that? Pooh.
That
the Pooniverse Monsters Assemble movie that they're doing because sure.
Pooniverse kind of sounds dirty to me for some reason.
It does. The Pooniverse. Oh, give me that Pooniverse. Anyway, there is another movie coming out that is not related to this. I'm not even sure who's producing this one, but it's called Mickey versus Pooh, or Mickey versus Winnie. So we're taking these two, Steamboat Willie and then the Winnie the Pooh thing. Why they're I don't know. I don't. But yeah, there we go. We got this horror movie happening, pitting these two characters that are now in public domain against one another. So, hooray!
I really want to see Winnie the Pooh get a hold of Mickey and tell him, like, I'm gonna put you in a honey jar, bitch.
Oh, now, Mickey, I'm gonna put you in a honey jar right now. Don't mess up my honey. Give me a smackerel while I'm in there.
He's gonna give him a smackerel.
I'm gonna give you a smackerel with my bear paw. I'm working on my poo. It's not that great. I don't.
It's much better than anything I would be able to do. But just how is that gonna play out? I
don't know.
You know, there's a guy that does like realistic. He takes cartoon characters and he does like realistic designs of them. And he did a Winnie the Pooh character, and it was basically like a grizzly bear, because he's like, if Winnie the Pooh's gonna be a realistic bear, he's gonna be like a grizzly or something like that. But it was this big realistic yellow bear with a red shirt on. I would see that horror movie all day long. Just a Winnie the Pooh that's murdering the shit out of people, and maybe there's just one part where somebody's like hallucinating and he talks and he sounds like Winnie the Pooh. I'd be all for that. That would be phenomenal.
Now,
I mean,
I have a scene in my head suddenly that they could have used if they were going to utilize the a sound alike. But he gets done killing somebody, and then he stops and he goes, "Oh, bother, I got some blood in my honey."
that'd be perfect too, because you got the title right there.
Yeah, right there, see?
I love that.
One last thing that I just remembered that I wanted to bring up on the show. Right now, this weekend that we're recording, FanCon, I think is what it's called up in Canada, is happening. Our very lovely friend Leah hosted a panel last night with John Brennan, Yuki Nakamura, and Ming Chen, and it was kind of like an hour-long little panel. They're just chit-chatting. I'm kind of hoping they're going to release it as a podcast so people can actually listen to it, or just watch you might actually be able to go to Barker Street Cinema, which is their YouTube page where they streamed it, and probably just pick up like a VOD or something like that. But well worth watching if you love our friends John and Leah, and of course Yuki and Ming are also both pretty fucking amazing too. Love to have them on the show.
I would love to have Leah and John on the show at the same time.
Oh my God, that would be.
I honestly, I think it would be cool to either just pick a basic subject and talk to them, or pick a movie that all of us can watch and just have at it, because that would probably be like a 2-3 hour episode.
Oh yeah,
but but it would be wonderful.
But yeah, I just wanted to give them a shout out real quick. If you haven't checked it out, go check it out on YouTube. I think it's just FanCon or Northern FanCon. I can't remember. They're promoting it all over Twitter and shit like that, so you can find it.
So I have two things. One is a news thing. So it's sort of related to horror in a way. The other one is just something kind of funny that happened. So Quentin Tarantino just announced that what was supposed to be his last film that he was going to direct, he was writing it and everything. He has said that it's no longer going to be even worked on. It's not. Apparently, he's not even going to rewrite it or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Which kind of sucks. But he has always talked about interest in doing a horror film. And whatever powers that may be, I'm going to put this out into the universe. I really hope, if Quentin Tarantino is deciding to write and direct one last film, that he does his own horror film. Because the way that he writes, the way that he tells stories, the stories that he tells, I think it would be something amazing. And I would just love to see that. So just a random little thing I want to put out there.
I mean, to be fair,
good.
In essence, he kind of sort of has dabbled in that universe.
Yeah.
You know, with, or the genre, I guess I should say, with Death Proof. Because I wouldn't really consider that a horror movie in a traditional sense, but there are horror elements to it.
It's like a horror action movie.
Yeah, because Kurt Russell's character would be kind of your serial killer type. But again, it does kind of, I don't want to say devolve, transitions to more of a action chase sequence.
And let's be real, too. Tarantino himself has starred in films that would be considered horror. From Dusk Till Dawn, he was in that. When they did Death Proof, they did the... because it was like the Grindhouse films. They did the one film where everybody was turning into zombies and everything.
Planet
And the girl
Terror?
gets the machine gun leg.
Yeah, Planet Terror.
Yes. He's in that. So, I mean, he has a little bit of familiarity with that stuff. But to see him at the helm, writing and directing something like that, he already does hyper-violence in his films, and he does it well. To where it's gory and everything, but it's not, as weird as it sounds, it's not distasteful. The way that he does it, it works. So seeing that in a horror film, I think would be really unique. And honestly, with Tarantino, I could see it now. He would create his own slasher, and it would become so iconic that it would be ridiculous, and then we'd never see it again.
Yeah, that's true. And
but
you know,
in a way that
he could do it too. Like, I don't think that there is a, not to say that it was going to be some grand master horror film that the world has never seen. We just know it'll be good. And you know for a fact that if he pitched it to any studio, they'd be like, sure, whatever you want. Because he's fucking Tarantino.
Exactly. Well, and it's just like, I'm surprised it hasn't happened yet. And say what you will about John Carpenter. When it comes to John Carpenter, I kind of have a love-hate thing for him. Because it seems like in recent years, he's kind of become one of these, I'm only doing it for the money type people.
Yeah.
It's just like, I've heard some things about Jamie Lee Curtis. You talk to her about horror films. She will not watch any horror film that she's not been in. She thinks that they're not the best. Like, I've seen interviews where she's talked about that, and I'm like, that seems kind of weird. I don't know if it's maybe a running joke that she has or what. I've also heard that she is kind of rude to other Scream Queens. She's been rude to Heather Langenkamp before and a few other people. I don't know how true all of that is. Obviously, I'm not there to see that happen. But back to Carpenter real quick. I've heard that he wants to direct a movie. He wants to do a Dead Space movie based off the video games. And I think about that a lot, and I'm like, that's sort of in the same vein as The Thing, if you think about it. And if you were to attach his name to something like that, you would think that they would want to make that happen.
Yeah.
But I would love to see that too. I mean, I think that would be phenomenal. Now, I'm not even going to try to segue into this just because I think this is really funny. And this is something we're going to have to do one episode, just go off on a riff on this. But I don't know what prompted the conversation, but my wife and I were having a conversation the other day, and we were talking about making extra money. And I said to her, well, I'm too ugly to do porn. I can't be a model. I said, I like to write. I said, what sells? What could I write that sells? She said, well, smut sells. I'm like, well, that's true. Smut does sell. I said, but what kind of smut would I write? She's like, I don't know. I said, how about horror smut? That'd be kind of funny. I could even base it off of horror icons that exist. And so we went down this rabbit hole of basically saying dirty things about horror movie villains. One of them was, get Freddy in the sheets. He'll be the man of your dreams. You'll have wet dreams on Elm Street. That was one of the jokes. She didn't understand the reference, and most people won't unless they have seen Freddy vs. Jason, but it was, get with Jason. He's got this big old thing. But my favorite one, because my wife loves Candyman. She loves Tony Todd. And I said, get with Candyman. He's sweet as honey, and once you're in the sheets, you'll be hooked.
Yikes.
So I was thinking, it would be so funny to just do taglines for horror villains in a dirty sense, almost like they have dating profiles. My pinhead one was, get with me. Chains and whips excite me.
Very good.
But I was thinking, and I was like, what would I do for Chucky? And the only one I could think of for Chucky was, I'll be your plaything. But I don't know how well that works. And I was thinking about it. I was like, I'm going to run this by Steve and see if it gets his brain spinning, because some of them are funny, and you know, it almost reminded me of at the conventions. There's that place that sells the underwear.
Yeah.
And they say things on the front, like the Ghostbusters one. The front of it on the man's underwear said "Bustin' makes me feel good." I mean, come on. But I was thinking about that. I was like, I have to tell Steven about this because it was hilarious the other day when we were talking about it.
I mean, I feel like with Chucky, you'd have to just go basic, but as blunt as he would be, get fucked by the Chuck. I mean,
I love it. See, that works.
That seems like him all over. Like, he's not going to play games. He's not going to pussyfoot around. It's just like, nope, here it is.
Samantha hates the creeper from Jeepers Creepers. And I was like, just think about it. The creeper, he'll eat you up. And she was like, shut the fuck up. I'm like, whoa, okay. Now, we like I said, I feel like this could be a whole conversation.
Sure, yeah.
But I was like, we got to think of we should think about that and just like randomly name things off occasionally. Like I was even thinking of Michael Myers. I was going to do something along the lines of the babysitter because it was originally going to be called the babysitter killings or the babysitter murders, and I was just trying to think of certain things for these characters, and I couldn't think of one for Ghostface, really. The only thing that I think of with Michael Myers is there's a running joke where it's him with his knife and it says, just a tip. Mm-hmm. Like, come on.
With Ghostface. Hang on. I'm trying to think of the lyrics for that fucking song. Damn it. Something like, I might seem bloody and this might seem crazy, but I want to kill you, so call me maybe. So I don't know. I'd have to think on that one.
Like I said, I'm just gonna do a list, and one episode just be like horror movie pickup lines,
yeah,
and just ramble them off because I don't know. We were talking about it, and it was so funny. Just especially when I got to the Candyman one, because she was like, "Will you just stop? Like you are being way too much."
I have those days.
And I was even thinking of like the girl from The Ring, and there was something along the lines of like the 7 days. I just couldn't think of. I had it and then I lost it. I was like, man. But
in 7 days, I'll make your face go.
There you go. Oh, and it's just like with Leatherface. There's so many. You could talk about he knows his way around a body, or you'll be tender when he's done. This is so many stupid things you could say, but oh god.
Oh, I could
my favorite would be I won't tell Grandpa if you don't.
Ooh. Turn traitor for a piece of tail.
Oh god. Well, what are we talking about today? Let's get into this because I'm excited about this, and I could just name off random stupidity all day today, but.
I thought it would be fun for us to talk about a movie that you had recommended to me many moons ago, I would say, on this show. I know you brought it up before and said, hey, check this out. And I feel like we may have brought it up sometime at the end of last season when we talked about The Last Voyage of the Demeter. Or it was earlier this season, I'm sorry. Because, we talked about that.
Yes, because I think we were talking about how Last Voyage of the Demeter was kind of a slow burn, but in a good way. And I think that's where I made the comparison, that this movie was kind of a slow burn, but it's worth it.
Well, also probably had something to do with the director.
Andre, I think so.
Overdahl, I think it's his name. I think he's Swedish.
Yeah,
Is he Swedish?
I think that was the main reason, but I think I kind of brought up the slow burn thing too, because I think I talked about how that's kind of a recurring thing with his films.
Oh, absolutely. I could see that 100% just looking at his filmography. So we're talking about The Autopsy of Jane Doe. Now, why have I suddenly watched this movie after being recommended so many times ago? Well, wouldn't you know it, the last drive-in hooked me up. So they did this episode for, I'm going to try to say it right, Walpurgisnacht, or whatever the holiday is. And I will say, I had no idea what this movie was about, but the fact that they were showing it while celebrating Walpurgisnacht kind of led me to figure out certain elements of the movie, because that's about witches. And I was like, so there's something about witches in this movie. That's all I kind of gleaned from it, but I was trying, like, I felt like that took a little bit of the mystery away. There were still some other little twists in there that I didn't see coming, which I appreciated, but I felt like that took away that one little element. Having a bit of context saying, this is what this is what they're talking about, this is the movie it's showing, so it's about witches, or something about a witch. That's all I could piece together. But it was enough to kind of take a little bit away. But overall, based on kind of what you said, the slow burn of it all, just trying to unravel a mystery, it was very interesting. You know, I kind of wish I'd have jumped on this a little bit sooner and had watched it on my own terms and not after the fact, or just because Joe Bob said to do it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it didn't take away from it. I mean, they actually talked to the writers and producer of the film, trying to get some understanding of where they kind of saw it, because I don't know, based on the way they were kind of talking about the character Jane Doe, whoever she was, they kind of saw her as the protagonist of the story. And typically that's who you kind of see as your hero in these things. And I was like, how the fuck do you see this person as a hero? But when you get context to who she is, it makes sense in a way, but not at the same time. You know what I'm saying? You're conflicted by it.
To me, to put it in, to not put it, I guess, as elegantly as you could put it. To me, I could see her as the hero because, and spoiler warning for everybody.
Yeah, full spoilers.
You know, Jane Doe is basically the witch in this. And she appears dead by every scientific method you could see, but in fact, she is very much alive, and she can feel everything that they are doing to her. And throughout the film, it takes time for it to be learned, but we learn that she is basically making them pay for what they are doing to her.
Yeah.
So I suppose I could see it in that regard, of her sort of being the protagonist in the way that she is dealing out punishment for those who are wronging her. But again, she sort of put herself into this situation in the first place.
Yeah.
So that's where it's hard for me to see her as the protagonist.
Because that's the other thing they really didn't do. I mean, we get some understanding of what may have happened to her, but we don't know anything about her. We don't know who she was. We don't know what torment she went through. We don't even know how she got into this mess. So you're left kind of wondering, and part of me wants to know, but at the same time, I feel like it would take away from at least this movie. Now, if you wanted to do a follow-up or something like that where you explain it, I don't really know if it would change much or give you any kind of reasoning to feel any different about her. Yeah. So I kind of don't want to know in a way. You know, I think that just kind of lends... She was somebody who just got caught up in the whole Salem witch trials. She got tortured to insane fucking degrees. And we don't even know to what degree she was alive through most of it because of all the damage we've seen. So there's no telling what she endured.
Well, and that's, at least, I think they did this film in the way that they did to leave a lot of it up to interpretation.
Yeah.
And to me, I think what happened, I think, like you said, she went through the witch trials, and I think she performed some kind of spell on herself so that when she was technically dead by our standards, she would basically live on so that she could always dish out revenge on those who would defile her body because of the way that her body was defiled when she was alive in the normal sense of being alive.
Yeah. And it also begs a lot of questions. If you do the timeline of when the Salem witch trials happened to when this movie takes place, which I would assume is about 2015, 2016, since it's supposed to be, seems to be current day, or at least for when it was released.
Yeah.
Have they just been passing this body around or just dumping it in hopes that no one would ever find it? I mean, you'd think you would just take it to a graveyard, bury it, and just be like, put it in a coffin, whatever, put it in a tombstone, seal it, done. She's dead in the ground. Granted, we know she's not, but for us, humans, just dispose of the body. Be done with it. bury it. You know?
Yeah, and part of me wonders if maybe that's part of the magic, the supernatural stuff around it. Maybe her body can't be stored. Maybe it does end up somewhere else. Maybe it manifests itself somewhere. You wouldn't think that it would be able to do it in like multiple locations or anything like that. But at the same time, it's like, what if her body, if her body's going to be stored, what if something happens to where someone almost gets hypnotized and they transport it and they dump it somewhere? Or like you said, maybe people are freaking out and they're like, we have to get rid of this body. We have to put it somewhere where nobody will ever find it. And obviously when people do that, it gets found.
Yeah. I mean, it was a very unique approach, because this is also one of those movies that use the term, it's more of a television term, but a bottle episode. So everything just happens within the morgue, or at least very, very limited to where they're cutting her open, doing all their investigations, and the little other parts inside and around the morgue. But most of the film takes place within that one spot.
Yeah.
And the fact that they go through procedures, that was another thing that they mentioned on the last drive-in interview, which I appreciated the hell out of, because it lends itself to a lot of credibility to the process of what's going on, because there are two stars pretty much for the entire movie. Brian Cox and Emil Hirsch play the morticians, father and son morticians. They kind of have their own little things going on. And they were watched and taught by actual morticians on how to do the procedures. And I thought, well, that's amazing, because you could have somebody just kind of poking and prodding and doing whatever, but to know the exact steps in which you go through helps the entire process, because they're not just like, well, we got to do this right now, we're going to just cut her open and see whatever. No, there's a process. And they took them step by step. It's like, you're going to start here, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do that, then you're going to start cutting open, then you're going to start digging in here. And when you have that context and you see how they went through the process, I appreciated that. And it does kind of lend to that slow burn, but that's part of the fascination with what you're looking at here.
See, that's my thing with it, is the film does have a very slow pace to it, but the fact that they are going through all of the processes and everything, and the fact that it is real, they are going through real processes. To me, and maybe it's because I just have that morbid curiosity in myself, I find that interesting. So to me, it was fascinating to watch how they would go about everything. So it didn't feel like, it wasn't a slow burn that was boring to me.
Right.
Because you're following along, and it's, as weird as it sounds, it's almost like you're learning something. As they're learning new things and they're discovering new things, you're doing that with them. And I think that really lends itself to the film. And the fact that they stuck with just these two in the morgue. I know we had some scenes where his name's Austin in the movie, but Emil Hirsch, his girlfriend or whatever, I know there's some scenes with her, and there's a few scenes with some other people. But the fact that they stick to the one location and around that one location, I appreciated the hell out of that, because you already feel a little uneasy that you're in the morgue.
Yeah.
When you're watching this. But the fact that they stay there and everything, you start to see that this is just these guys' life. This is what these guys do. And you're watching this play out, and you don't have to pay attention to a million different settings, a million different things that are changing. You're just with two guys and a dead girl. And I think for this movie that works really well, because it really puts a focus on what's happening. Like you know something's going to happen. And I'm going to bring this up real quick, because throughout the whole film, even though it is a slow burn, the fact that we stay with these people, we stay close to the body, we stay close to the father and the son, the suspense that is created through that, because you don't know what's going to happen and you're waiting for something. I mean, there were parts where I was on the edge of my seat. I mean, literally watching the TV, focused, hyper-focused, looking all over the place to see if there was something hiding in the shadows, to see if something weird was happening. There were scenes when they were messing with her. I was expecting her to move, or, something crazy to happen. But even the most subtle things, when they happened, you're just like, ooh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
And I think that helps because of how much they were just focused where they were at with it.
And I guess I didn't quite, maybe I missed something. And if you can remember, by all means, clarify it for me. Was there some animosity between the father and son in some way that I may have missed, other than maybe he didn't just want to be there?
If I remember right from the film, I think the son, I think it was a classic story of the son didn't want to follow in his father's footsteps.
Okay. That's kind of what I was gathering from it, but I wasn't sure.
I think the son also had, because the dad was kind of religious, I believe, and the son kind of got away from it a little bit, I think. It's like there was a divide between them. Like the son was not wanting this life.
Right.
And that was like the big thing, if I remember right. It's been a minute since I've seen it. I'll have to watch it on the last drive-in since they talk about it, because that would be really cool to see. But
sure.
Yeah, it's been a minute. And that's another thing I want to point out. Emile Hirsch and Brian Cox, they worked wonderful together in this. I like Brian Cox as an actor anyways. I'm not super familiar with Emile Hirsch. I feel like I've seen him in a few things.
He's one of those that he started off pretty strong, and I don't want to say he's faltered, but I can't say I've really seen a lot of his films, but he's been in some big stuff, and then he's just kind of, I don't know, trickled into some oddball stuff here lately. So,
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I Brian Cox, if you don't know who Brian Cox is, you live under a rock. I'm sorry, but that's just...
You throw a rock, you've seen one of his movies somewhere. In
Yeah.
fact, I guarantee you've heard him on television when he's pitching a fucking Big Mac. That's his goddamn voice.
Yep, I hear him on the radio almost every morning.
What is the catchphrase he says is in that? Because he's always like, get yourself a quarter pounder with cheese. McDonald's, or whatever the fuck
Yeah,
he says.
he's all... I mean, he commits.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
And you know, that's something in this film, too, I really love about him. Because normally when I see him in things, he is kind of like... He goes over the top sometimes. In this, I don't feel like he did. I feel like he was pretty subtle in this.
Mm-hmm. Very.
And I thought his performance was fantastic. And I feel like he really sold the father-son aesthetic with Emile Hirsch. I think they had a really good dynamic in it. And obviously we have to talk about Jane Doe.
Mm-hmm.
Olwen Kelly. There were parts in the movie where I thought it was just a dummy, but she laid there naked on that table.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of people would probably argue, well, she didn't really do much. Okay, well, she didn't really do much, but you want to know something? I feel like that would take a lot more work.
Oh, yeah. And having to do it nude all day with people around you. I mean, Christ, there was a scene where Brian Cox was like face front in the middle of her legs, and you're just like, God. And I understand there's practices and everything that they've got to go through, but just think about that. I've heard of people like actors and actresses talk about how uncomfortable it is just doing sex scenes together. And they're supposed to be interacting and being intimate with one another. And she's just lying there, bare ass naked, in front of everybody. Mm-hmm. And she has to stay that way for, 8 hours a day?
Probably, yeah.
I mean, goddamn, I give her so much credit for being able to just withstand the stress that could have caused somebody. I mean, she had to have gotten through it in her head somehow, but I mean, you're so vulnerable, like that.
And you got to think too, like she's 37 right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
Brian Cox is 77, so he's 40 years her senior. Maybe old enough to be her dad or her grandpa.
Yeah,
possibly. To have somebody doing that to you, it would make you feel very uncomfortable if you weren't good at what you did. And let's be real, I don't think I would want to lay naked, barely breathing. I mean, you have to look like you're dead.
Yeah.
And I know she had some like subtle movements and things. There were times where her mouth opened and her eyes opened, and you could make that look really cheesy if you didn't do it right. But with how subtle she was with everything, I definitely would say that she earned the respect that she got for this film. I will say that.
Yeah. I even want to throw out too that the writers and producer, somebody confirmed that if you're paying attention, her facial features do change ever so slightly, but they're subtle, but they're there, and that's intentional. And I thought that's clever. That's good. Because I wasn't really paying attention, but you kind of notice it, but not so much. Because you're just like, her face looks a little different. Maybe they moved something. Maybe they touched her or something like that. So you kind of assume it's just through the process of moving her body around.
And see, and that's one of those little things that it makes you think while you're watching the film, because I feel like that's why this film is so strong, because you could have a bunch of big jump scares. You could have a whole bunch of big things happen that would cause you to freak out. But when it's subtle things like what they do in this, that's what it does. It makes you think. You're like, wait a minute. Her eyes look like they're slightly off from how they were a second ago. Why is that? Mm-hmm. Why is this happening now? Why is this? Or, something gets moved slightly and you're not necessarily scared, but it makes you feel uneasy because you're like, why is this happening? Yeah. And you start to question everything. You wonder, like, did they move something maybe when we didn't see, or what is happening here? And this film does that beautifully.
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of great things that this movie does. I'm really having a hard time outside of the slow burn, but I don't even want to call that a bad thing, because for a movie that's not even 90 minutes long, it's the suspense of it all. This is not a movie about jump scares or things like that. It's about the suspense building up slowly and the tension releasing by the end, because you don't know what's happening. And then as everything starts to become more clear, it starts to you start to question every little thing. It's like, oh, what's happening? Like when they actually really started to get haunted within the mortuary and all the lights went off, everything started to blow up and all that. And of course they could just chalk it up as, it's a storm. There's a storm outside, whatever. But there's something there and you're not quite sure what's going on. So you see the darkness, you're seeing a body, you don't know what body, you don't know who. And then we're finding out it's not her. She's reanimated other corpses, or at least that's what we assume. Because that was another detail that they mentioned, that they had an alternate ending that would have said that it was all in their minds. Like none of this shit happened. It was just they imagined it all, or I guess however it worked out, it was all in their minds. People didn't like that. People were like, nah, I don't like that. So that's why we got the ending we did get. And I could see where that would piss people off. But then that would also kind of take away, I don't guess it would take away from it, because if it was all in their minds, then none of this shit would have happened. So do they wake up from it and they're just like, oh, what was that? And everything's fine? Because the one scene that really got me, and I was not expecting, was when they killed Emma.
Yeah.
When they were in when he swung that axe out of there, she was the farthest thing from my mind, because we saw her at the beginning, she left, and you're just like, well, I guess that's the last we'll see of her. Not thinking that she would come back. We had no indication she was even in the building. Yeah. And it's just like, oh shit. So he just murdered somebody. And when that scene happened, I'm like, how the fuck are you going to get out? Like, how do you explain that to the cops? Because eventually you're going to have to explain this shit. How are you going to explain that? And of course, the movie ends in the worst way possible. And it's like, well, shit. So here was a question that got posed to me, and I didn't really think about it, but in a way, I guess there's part of it that makes sense to me. Do you think that Jane would have let Austin live had he not killed his dad? Reason being is because it was like Tommy was saying she was trying to inflict that pain onto him that she had. So the thought process was, well, he has to endure all of it, and then the curse would end, or I don't know, whatever it may be, he had to endure it, every bit of it. Everything she went through, he had to go through, because she was sitting there twisting him up and all that. Yeah. And then, of course, he was reaching for that scalpel. And what was posed to me is like, maybe he was supposed to cut his tongue off because she had her tongue cut out. But then instead, Austin stabs him, puts him out of his misery, and then he dies too. I don't know if that's would have been the case, but it was an interesting thought process, very much kind of like you said, kind of leave stuff for you to decide on your own. And I didn't consider that at first.
I don't necessarily think it would have made a difference, at least in my opinion, because while his dad did do most of the work on her, Austin was still a part of it.
Yeah.
He was still doing everything as well. And I don't necessarily think... Do I think that maybe he would have died? I think that is still up for debate. I think it would have gone one of two ways. I think that he still would have killed his dad, And I think that instead of killing him, I think Jane would have broken him mentally the rest of the way because of everything that he had already done. So I think instead of dying, he would have been locked away somewhere.
Yeah, that was actually a concern of mine too, because once his dad was dead and he was going to get out, I was like, all this shit's going to be pinned on him. That was literally what I thought. I was like, he's not getting out of this. They're going to think he lost his fucking mind. Even still, at the end, they could have made that like a murder-suicide.
Yeah.
I mean, what else did you have to go on? Taking a look at the morgue and everything, it's just like, goddamn. But even the cop, I mean, he was just like, there's no way. And that would just be really, really hard to I put into context in your brain if you knew two people that well, as much as that sheriff seemed to know them, because it was a small town. So
yeah,
as soon as they started throwing out suggestions, you could, like, he pretty much shut it down. It's like, no, there's just no, like, he couldn't comprehend it. And I'm like, yeah, because if there was no sign that they were ever going to be that at each other's odds, and why would it be a murder-suicide? Like, what would have made the son snap? Or, because I mean, that's how I would view it, because you had the girlfriend dead, the father's dead, and then he just looked like he jumped off the stairs, and that was that. So
yeah.
As a detective, that's how I would deduce that.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly think, I don't think there would have been a happy ending for any of these characters, no matter what would have happened. And I'm glad you brought that question up, because I never really thought about that myself either. You know, if somebody's not there to endure the pain that was inflicted, then it has to be passed on to someone else.
Yeah.
So I guess that would also beg to ask to ask the question of if the curse was making Tom, which I hit Tommy, but I'll call him Tom, the dad, if he had to endure all of the things that he did to her, if he died from it, like if his son wouldn't have killed him, if he would have died from it, then would the rest of it be passed on to Austin? And then whatever was left, Austin would suffer? You know, how does that all work? I mean, there's a lot of wiggle room in that perception, but also this curse itself, obviously this body keeps being moved around, so there's probably been other people who have died. We never heard anything about any survivors warning us to, you know, stay away from the body, and maybe that's how it all works. Maybe this curse is so bad that this is what it results in, and these people have to die.
But you'd think at some point there would be a through line somewhere, like someone could connect some dots, looking at certain autopsies. A Jane Doe came in, some shit happened, and then they moved the body again, because that's what they were doing by the end of the movie. They were just taking her to another damn mortuary. So it's just, is it going to start all over again or what? And again, I don't know if I'd want a sequel to this, because I feel like you run the risk of just repeating yourself and not doing anything interesting with it.
I would love to see what would happen if somebody tried to cremate her.
Sure, yeah.
Like, I think that would be an interesting concept. But this is one of those movies that I agree with you. I don't think it needs a sequel, because I feel like that would take away. And I would rather just wonder, like, I wonder where Jane Doe is now. I wonder what's happening now. I always talk about this. What makes a great horror movie is after you turn it off, you're still thinking about it a little bit. And this is one of those movies that does that. You turn it off and you're like, man, I still have questions. And the thing about this movie is I don't get mad about the questions that don't get answered. Sometimes you get mad about questions that aren't answered in movies. With this movie, I don't necessarily get like mad about questions that I have that I don't have an answer to, because it just adds to the mystery of it all. The only thing that I will say kind of sucks for anybody that has to do an autopsy on her is you do have to cut into her a little bit. You do have to look a little bit to find the clues, because if I remember right, weren't there symbols underneath her skin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just a whole map full.
So you're already, you know, having things that you're going to have to endure, that you're going to have to suffer to figure it out. But at the same time, this is the body of a witch who is still alive, who has done this to herself, from what I would assume, to basically punish people for the rest of time.
The only way I would want to see a sequel is if they could do one of two things. You got to make it interesting in the sense that you're doing something you didn't do beforehand, because we already know the mystery. So now you have to be like, okay, now how could you make this undead witch, I guess undead would be the proper term here, how do you do this again in a way that would be interesting or maybe take it in a new direction? So I got 2 suggestions. One, you have a very creepy mortician who likes to play with the bodies. If you want to go necrophiliac, you can go for it. That might be a step too far for some people, but there are people out there like that. You could do like a Weekend at Bernie's style movie. Weekend at Jane Doe's, and you're just carrying her around. I know that's ridiculous. Or maybe somebody actually ends the curse. Like if there is a rhyme or reason to it, how do you break it? But only if you can come up with solid rules that don't conflict with everything that you set up in the last film. That's all I would say. That you could put her to rest in some way.
Yeah.
But I don't know how you do that. I don't know how that would go about. So I'm not going to lose sleep if we don't get a sequel.
I would even, just a suggestion, I would even think it would be interesting if, let's say there is someone who has been following these Jane Doe, this whole Jane Doe thing. They've seen that this body's been moved. Like you were saying, there's probably records somewhere. The bodies have been moved the body's been moved from this morgue to this morgue to this morgue, and people are dying.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say someone has an understanding of maybe the occult, maybe of witchcraft and things like that. And maybe that person comes to a morgue that has Jane Doe, and the weird things are already starting to happen a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that person comes there with the sole purpose of breaking the curse.
Sure.
But don't make the curse easy to break. I wouldn't want to see that. I would want it to be kind of, complex, and maybe that person is haunted too. Now, I have a question, because I can't remember. In the film, because like you said, there was a thing where they were talking about how it was all in their heads.
Yeah.
Is there a scene, and I might be thinking of a different movie, because Jane Doe reanimates other corpses.
Yes.
And one of the corpses, I think, actually does, walk through somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Now, they have a motion detection thing, don't they? Doesn't it detect something? And they're like, well, that's weird or something. I thought there was something like that, but I can't remember.
Okay.
Because that's what I thought, too. I thought it was just in... Yeah, because I'm like, maybe it is just in their heads. Maybe she's putting things into their minds. But I thought that there was some kind of motion detection thing that showed that this was... Because, like I said, I don't remember if it's this movie in particular, but I do remember watching a movie where I'm like, yeah, maybe it's just in their heads. And then something goes off, some kind of motion detection thing goes off. And I'm like, oh, wait, no, it's not. Because that was like a, oh, crap moment for me.
I don't remember 100%, to be honest with you. I don't remember any kind of set off alarm or anything like that, but
I can't remember.
Other parts of it that kind of, I'm not remembering my details correctly. Like it wasn't a big plot point, but it was something that maybe happened because...
I'm going to have to go back and watch. It's been a while since I've watched it, but
yeah,
I'm going to have to go back and watch it because I'm glad that the last drive-in looked at it because I couldn't remember... I can't remember all the details, but it'd be nice to hear some other things that I might not have known about the film. Was there anything in particular that you didn't like about the film? I mean, was there something that you kind of, even if it was just like a minor little
I mean, I will kind of go back to the slow burn of it all. There was a moment or two that I felt like I was kind of losing interest just a little at the beginning. That part of the slow burn maybe was like struggling to get into it for a little bit. Well, once it finally got going, I feel, and I hate to use that for some people because I know there are some people out there, if it doesn't hook you within the first 5 or 6 minutes, they're out. And I might have been distracted at that point when I started it. So I feel like that's where I missed some of the details, especially between the father and son, as I was kind of watching it, but also felt like I was distracted with other things. And then finally it was just like, all right, I gotta stop getting distracted. I want to focus here. And then I finally got zoned in. So that might be on me. But I really can't think of anything that I just did not like. I mean, I really appreciated what they were doing. I didn't feel like there were any dumb decisions that the characters made where you're just like, what the fuck are you doing? Why are you doing it? Don't do that. Everything made sense within the context of what we're watching. And even like you said, the questions that are kind of left unanswered, they're not questions that hurt the story at all.
Yeah.
You're looking at questions for like who Jane is. That's a question that, sure, I want to know, but does it hurt the story? Does it affect the story? No. I mean, it's not about that. There are just those unanswered questions that do not affect the narrative as it's set, but yeah, you are left wondering a lot, and I appreciated that. So no, I really can't think of anything specific that I didn't like.
Yeah, I will say too, another thing that I will give this movie a lot of props for. I feel like it did really well. You know, these guys are scientists, whether they're morticians, but they are scientific in the way that they do things. And throughout the whole film, they do try to explain everything that is happening scientifically. And then we get into our final act where they now understand that things are not going to be explained through science and that something supernatural is going on. And I feel like they were just as lost as someone would be if this was really happening.
Yeah.
And I respect that, because it wasn't like all of a sudden they had all this knowledge on it. But I also didn't feel like they were stupid about it either. They were trying what they thought would work the best to fix the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And as weird as it sounds, even though, and maybe it's because we're with these characters the whole time, you really feel for them. Like, I felt really bad for these characters. And I remember watching this, and after the dad dies, after he dies, I'm like, please let Austin make it out of this place. If he makes it out, he'll be fine. Just please let him make it. Please let him make it. Let somebody survive. Let someone survive. And then he falls, and I'm like, did he die? Because you kind of wonder for a second, like, did he die, or did he just get hurt real bad? What's going on? And then, we see the police coming and taking out the bodies and everything, and you're just like, oh, man. Like, it felt like such a waste. And like, you legitimately feel for these characters, because you're just as lost as they are while everything is happening. And then we get into the final act where they're like, okay, this is not something that we can explain. This is something supernatural. We need to do something. Let's try whatever we can to fix this. And then you hope and you pray that they fix it, but it's too late. And I appreciate the hell out of it for being able to pull at least pull me into it like that, because, a lot of films, horror film or not, if the finale messes it up, it feels like everything else was a waste. Sure. And I don't feel like this film lacked in its finale. Was it the ending that I wanted? No, I was hoping that someone would make it out. But now that, we've sort of had this conversation, even if he would have made it out, he'd have taken the fall for everything.
Absolutely.
And he would have got locked up somewhere, because it was Jane Doe, she's a witch, she's alive. And I think by the time that if I remember right, by the time that they had gone to get her body was perfectly fine again.
Yeah, it sealed itself up before anybody got there.
So, and I'm also glad that they didn't show that process, because I feel like that would have taken away from it too.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they would have shown the body like close up and heal and everything, that would have just killed it for me.
Yeah.
It's the things that we don't see. A lot of horror movies forget that it's the things that you don't see that really make a difference in them. And this film relies on that a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's why it's so good. I am so glad that you got to finally watch this, by the way. Like, I know I've said that a few times, but I really am. I'm glad that you got to watch this, because I had a feeling that you would enjoy it. It's a very unique film, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as soon as I saw that they were showing it, I was like, yep, I got to watch this, because we've been talking about it, and I wanted to set out and do it, and I felt like this is as good a time as any if they're showing it, so it must be time. So
yeah, I'll have to. Do you remember about how long that episode of The Last Drive-In was? Was it? I know they're normally like 2 hours, because they talk about them and everything.
It was probably about 2.5 hours. So they probably spent a good hour doing interviews and whatnot. Because like I said, they talked to the producer, and then they talked to the writers, and bring them out at different times and just kind of question them about everything. And like I said, I thought that alone just kind of added some extra information that just kind of contextualized a lot of what was going on. So I was kind of getting this information, and even Joe Bob was very careful. They were all kind of careful about not spoiling anything as we were watching it. So if there was something coming up, they would wait and hold that question for after the fact, and then kind of explore that. So I appreciated that, so they weren't jumping ahead for those of us who hadn't quite seen it.
Yeah, and I don't even know if this movie was released in theaters. I think this was like a direct...
That was one of the things the producer talked about. He said it did have a theatrical run, but it was very, very small. And it could have been bigger because I think they were doing it on the festival circuit and it got a lot of praise. But he sold it off to a distributor, like a very smaller one, before the bigger studios got a hold of it. So it could have had a wider release, but he shut the door on that pretty quick and didn't think about it. So very, very small.
That makes sense then, because it never showed up on any of the playlist for movie theaters around here that I remember, because I wasn't even sure if it ever actually even remotely got any kind of theatrical release. So that's news to me then.
If I'm not mistaken, I think he said it was IFC Midnight was the label that picked it up. So they probably showed it at a few of their theaters and whatnot, and that's about as far as it got.
Makes sense. And I think that's why it's fallen under the radar.
Oh yeah, 100%. Because
like
Christ, look at your two leads, man. I mean,
yeah,
that's solid casting right there.
I'm trying to think too. I'm gonna look her up real quick. The actress that played Jane Doe. I'm trying to think of what, because it doesn't seem like she's been in.
I don't think she's been in anything else. Maybe one other movie. I think when I looked.
Winter Ridge, Darkness on the Edge of Town. A lot of movies that I've never heard of. She is, well, this makes sense, I guess. Here's what it says about her. She was born in Ireland. She is primarily a model, but is also an actress, most famous for playing Jane Doe in the film Autopsy of Jane Doe, and she's married with one daughter. And she was born in Dublin, Ireland. So she mainly models. So that's why she's probably only done a few films. She's a very pretty lady. In Autopsy of Jane Doe, I mean, she looks like a corpse. But looking at the pictures that have popped up of her, she's a very, very pretty lady. So, because witches have to be pretty. They can't be ugly in new movies.
No,
they have to be pretty. So would this be a movie then that you think you'd recommend to people?
Oh, absolutely. I think everybody should give it a watch at least one time. Just if you've already listened to this full all the way through, then I mean, still go give it a watch, but you should have watched it first. We told you spoilers up at front. I don't want you to have a movie spoiled for you. But yeah, I would recommend it to people for sure.
Yeah.
So
is it something that you think you might like? Would it be something that you would end up watching again?
Alone, I don't know, but if I was with friends or something like that and somebody hadn't seen it, I might throw it out as a recommendation and watch it again that way, because I love doing that. I love introducing people to a new movie or something they've not seen, and especially if I can be there when they're watching it, that's always a thrill. So, but I mean, it's possible I could pop it on one time and just be like, oh, I want to check this out again, because something in it just sticking in my head, and I wanted to give it another watch. So yeah,
gotcha. Never
say never.
Like I said, it's been so long since I have watched it that I think I would be okay with, because some movies, I get that. There's some movies that if I have a friend that wants to watch it, I'll watch it with them. But I'm also one of those people, if I haven't seen a movie in quite a while and I want to refresh myself on it, then I'll give it a watch. And since they did it on the last drive-in, that just seems like a bonus, that I'd be able to watch it and talk about it and listen to people talk about it and everything. But yeah, I'm glad that you got to watch it. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. It's definitely a film that doesn't get the attention I think it deserves.
Sure.
And we're gonna have to just find some more random movies to watch. I've been seeing there's a movie on Tubi of all places. It's a Tubi original, and I'll have to find the name of it. But apparently, it's actually pretty damn good. Okay. And everybody's been shocked. They're like normally horror movies on Tubi, unless it's like a movie that just got brought over to Tubi from somewhere else. Normally they're not very good, but this is apparently a pretty good movie. It's about a family is like going on vacation. They meet these two strangers, and then shit just goes sideways.
I think I know what you're talking about.
It's some Tubi movie, I guess, but I've heard good things about it. And then I know I would really like to watch When Evil Lurks, and Leah has talked to us about that. I know she was surprised that we hadn't seen it.
It's just one of those right there that I've just got to get around to. I still haven't watched Thanksgiving. I'm so disappointed in myself for that, because I was looking forward to that, and it's on Netflix, and I could watch it right now.
And I just got Netflix back. We just got Netflix back because there was something on there that someone, they had to have Netflix to watch it, and they're like, I need to watch it. And I was like, well, then just sign up. We just signed up for the ad plan because most of the plans with the ads, they play all the ads at the beginning of the movies, and then you're done.
Mm-hmm.
And we have it. I just have to make sure that we can watch it because Netflix is a bunch of assholes, and if you have the ad plan, there's certain things that they don't let you watch.
Yeah, which is garbage.
Yeah, it was kind of funny though. My father, he was on Netflix, and the very first movie that he was like, man, I want to watch this. We clicked it, and it said, this isn't supported by our ad plan due to licensing issues. And I'm like, really? You want me to go from paying $7 a month to paying $16 a month just to hopefully be able to watch this? Okay, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. They're gonna fall apart one day. It's just a matter of time.
It's funny because video stores are going to come back. I can just see it now.
I mean, they died because it was like, well, people are just streaming at home, but now everybody's talking about physical media again. So I think it's time. Bring them back.
Let's take a note from Fallout. I want to go to the movie store and get the tapes like they have in Fallout.
Yeah.
They look like 8 tracks, but you pop them in and you play them. I'd be okay with that.
Sure. A little radiation in your house. Nothing wrong with that.
And put Walton Goggins in some actual westerns where he plays that character and let him release some movies. I'll even watch those.
Come on now.
I swear the ghoul is just the guy from Hateful Eight. That's all I'm gonna say because it reminds me so much of that. You know what I think it is? I think when they give I always say Walter. When they give Walton Goggins a role, I think they're just like, you're so badass just as yourself. Just be yourself.
Just be yourself.
But maybe say asshole and bitch and this and that a little bit more. Okay.
Okay. You got it.
Oh, man. Well, I don't have anything else about Jane Doe if you don't have anything else about Jane Doe. So if you want to tell all those wonderful ramblers out there where they can find us, be my guest.
Ramblers, what did you think about the Autopsy of Jane Doe? Have you seen it? Have you not seen it? Are you thinking about going to watch it? We recommend it, so go give it a watch if you haven't. Let us know on social media at Horror Ramblings, or send us an email at horrorramblings@gmail.com, or you can join us on our Facebook group or Discord and let us know what you think over there. Check us out on Instagram. Support us over on Patreon, Pencil Paper Productions over there, and you can help the show grow by leaving a 5-star review in your favorite podcasting app. Tell your friends to do the same. See if we've got any questions or polls over on Spotify, or just keep up with any and all things over at pencilpaperproductions.com/horror-ramblings. Links are down below.
And remember, guys, stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings podcast. Join us next time for even more.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.